Action step 3 is to figure out who within your state or local government will have a role in complying with the rule. So this will not be the responsibility of just one person. This is going to be a collaborative effort that very likely involves several people. So, reading through action step 3, if we start midway through the first paragraph, it reads, if you are an ADA coordinator, you are a good person to start thinking about the roles involved. And then it adds, different approaches will work for different entities, but then here are some things to consider. And we have several bullet points. So let's go through these now. It's helpful to think broadly about who should be involved. While web developers or IT staff can play an important role in ensuring accessibility, they're not the only ones. Exactly. So, accessibility is going to go beyond just the people that you would traditionally think of as the tech people. It's going to be everyone concerned with or involved in the digital assets that are under your control. So it's not just the people that are working on the websites, it's also the people who are creating content, people who are creating documents, everyone that touches technology and the digital assets. And then we have a really good example here that procurement staff can play a key role because they ensure that your entity is buying or licensing accessible content or mobile apps. Exactly. So this is a really good example that highlights it's more than just who you might think of initially. It's going to be everyone who is involved in technology. And so here with procurement staff, let's say we have all of these efforts around accessibility, but then our procurement staff is procuring inaccessible products or services that are going to be used and relied upon by our entity. That's going to be problematic. So again, everyone here is involved. There are going to be many more people who have roles in accessibility than you might think. Continuing on to the next bullet point, it's a good idea to set clear expectations for staff. And what I particularly like here is they add, you can start creating a culture of accessibility in your state or local government. Exactly. The culture is going to be so important, especially if the leadership is involved with accessibility and they're really prioritizing it. That's going to be extremely helpful because if we have a fragmented staff, if we have some people who are concerned with accessibility and then others who are discarding it or just leaving it to someone else, that's going to be a problem. We need everybody on the same page because even if just one person isn't paying attention or isn't concerned with accessibility, it's going to create more work for others. And this is something where it won't always be this grand endeavor. Eventually, you will get to a point where accessibility is really seamless and a part of what you do. Yes, there's some additional work, but it won't be something that requires so much thought and attention. It will just become a part of your processes. But especially when you start out, it's so important that there's a culture of accessibility. People are paying attention to accessibility. They're asking questions, they're learning, they're training. This is very important. And then we have here the sentence, it's important to clearly identify who is responsible for what so there is no confusion. Exactly. To start out, we need everybody's responsibilities and roles clearly defined. We're going to add also timelines for specific objectives, but it's very important for everyone to know what they are responsible for in terms of accessibility. And then we have this third bullet point. Think about what resources your staff will need. So it reads, your public entity should consider whether its current staff and volunteers have any expertise in web accessibility or whether working with others with more expertise would be helpful. So if there is anybody on staff that has expertise in digital accessibility, that will be extremely helpful. But you very likely will need to source out to a consultant or a digital accessibility to help infuse some expertise and really accelerate the learning curve so that you can meet the compliance deadline. And so just having someone as an advisor is going to be extremely helpful and will be a useful resource as you work towards compliance. The next bullet point reads, working with vendors doesn't mean your public entity is off the hook. So if you decide to have, like, let's say a digital accessibility company work on your accessibility or help you with accessibility, it reads that it's still a good idea to identify a person or people in your public entity who will oversee or coordinate that work. This is very important because ultimately you are responsible, and that's what it reads next. Your public entity is responsible for ensuring accessibility. So even if you have a really good you're sourcing to a really good company or a really good agency that is concerned with digital accessibility, you still need to make sure that everything is in place, that the requirements are met, and you need to be sure that you're looking out for possibly your exceptions as well. So it is going to be very helpful and realistically necessary for you to work with a digital accessibility company or an agency, or at least a digital accessibility specialist as you are working towards compliance. But you also need to keep in mind that you are the one that is responsible for meeting the compliance requirements. It's not as simple as, well, we hired a company and they said they would take care of everything, but they didn't, so we can't be responsible because we tried. No, you're still responsible, but the way to look at the company that you're sourcing work to is you're leveraging their expertise to accelerate your efforts and work towards compliance sooner so that you can meet the deadline. So that's what this bullet point reads, is that you're still responsible even if you outsource to someone else. And then we also see a preview to action step 10. So we will get to that later on. And then last, we have the bullet point of your public entity may need advice from others. So this is just taking into consideration that particular to your situation, you may need legal advice. So just keep that in mind. And then there is a bullet point with more resources for this topic. But here we're just setting out roles and responsibilities and then thinking about who else we might need to bring in to help us with compliance. So that's going to do it for action step 3. In the next video, we will look at action step 4, and there will be resources in the description for this video should you need help with training or services to help you work through accessibility.